Good morning, everyone. This is Max with Explore to the Max. Are you interested in getting into the hobby of wildlife watching? Well, in this video, I'm going to give out my top 10 tips for how to get into wildlife watching and start to enjoy and appreciate this amazing hobby. So to learn about these tips, let's get started. So the first of my tips is just get outside and start exploring. First of all, if you get outside, that's the best way to find animals because animals are just outside in natural places. They also can go into like urban settings and suburban backyards. So just get outside. That's the best way to just get out where the animals are going to be and also explore around. You may find locations that you really like and that find that the animals also like those locations as well. My next tip is to spend a lot of time in just one area. Um, so when you're first starting out, if you just want to know what everything you're seeing is and you want to find stuff, it can be overwhelming if you go to many different environments and ecosystems and try and figure out what you're seeing. Because you're just not knowledgeable about many of the species you're seeing. You haven't had a lot of experience with identification. So it's just a lot harder if you do it that way. So I recommend starting in just one location and spending a lot of time there, just getting to know the wildlife in that one particular area. So this is how I got into wildlife watching. So one summer during high school, I just decided I was going to spend the whole summer photographing and studying the wildlife in my backyard. And I lived on the edge of a neighborhood that had wilderness right next to it, so this was very easy for me to do. It won't necessarily be as easy for everyone else. But yeah, I had lots of bird species that I was able to photograph and observe. That taught me a lot about bird identification and also helped me connect bird behavior and mannerisms with ID. I also observed a good amount of mammal activity. I learned about the reptiles that live in my backyard as well, and assembled photos that I'd gathered from earlier years. So doing that in that one specific area really helped me to get started with identification. And then from there, I branched out to other ecosystems, and it was just a lot easier after that initial step. So I encourage you to, when you're just getting started, to pick one area that you really enjoy spending a lot of time in and just learn about that one area for a few months. And then once you've gotten the experience in that one area, move on to another and just expand your horizons from there. My next tip is to get out either in the early morning or the evening around sunset. So yeah, the times right before and after sunrise and right before and after sunset are usually the times that see the greatest amounts of activity for most animals. This is definitely true for birds, and it's also true for mammals. And there are certain types of animals that will be active maybe during the middle of the day, some will be active at night, and you won't catch them during those hours. But if you go in the morning and the evening, you will greatly increase your chances of seeing wildlife because that's when wildlife is generally most active. So my next tip is to tread lightly and stay quiet whenever you're going around exploring and looking for wildlife. So wild animals pretty much across the board are scared of humans and in general large animals and noisy things. And so if you can reduce the amount of noise that you make, that will prevent animals from knowing that you're there, which can end up allowing you to get much closer to animals and also see some that if you weren't really quiet may not be confident enough to come out into an open area where you can see them. My next tip is to alternate between walking around and looking for wildlife and standing in one place for an extended period and seeing what comes across your path. And the reason why I recommend this is because, sure, if you cover a lot of distance, you'll end up seeing potentially more animals because you have more land that you're going over, and you go through the territories of more individual animals. However, if you stay in one place for a while, either just wandering around a small area or just sitting down in one spot and just waiting to see what crosses your path, that may allow more secretive animals to come out. You may notice things that you would have missed if you were just walking around. For example, you may see a little hint of movement that you just wouldn't have noticed if you were walking. You may also hear animals when you're just in one area. That's one really good reason to just be there, is because you can hear small noises much easier, which actually leads into my next point. My next tip is to listen carefully wherever you go. A lot of animals are heard before they're seen, and some you may hear and you may never see because they're just so hard to locate. So if you listen carefully for the sounds of, I don't know, birds or mammals moving through the brush or different calls, that will help you locate the animals much easier than if you just were looking for movement and trying to find them by sight. My next tip is to look for movement. So listening can definitely help you pinpoint certain animals, but a lot of times I find that one of the first things that gives away animals' presence is if I see some sort of movement, like the bushes or on the ground. This won't always work for all animal groups, like reptiles and amphibians, owls, nocturnal animals that just hide during the day. Those animals will not be easily detected by movement. However, birds and a lot of daytime mammals can be detected with movement. So I encourage you to just scan your surroundings and look for any movement that you can find. My next tip is to look for inanimate evidence of animal life. So what I mean by inanimate evidence is anything that shows that an animal has been in a particular area, but not the animal itself. So for example, like scat and poop, like poo that birds have left on like their favorite perches, burrows, depressions where animals have like sat, all those sorts of things. If you look for that in the environment, it can usually give some kind of clue as to where the animals like to hang out and where to focus your attention if you're actually looking for them. My next suggestion is to familiarize yourself with the potential hazards of the environments you're going into. So being outdoors, you could potentially run into some dangerous situations. So I would encourage you to just look up what potential hazards there are and what to do if you encounter them. For example, are there wildfires in your area? Is your area usually hot and dry? Are thunderstorms really common? Just things like that. Make sure that you're familiar with all those hazards. Also, be aware of what dangerous animals occur in your area and what to do if you encounter them in case the worst should happen. Animal attacks on people are generally very rare. However, they do occur, so you should be prepared in case that happens. Also, I encourage you to familiarize yourself with any venomous animals that are in your area. Like for example, snakes. Know what the venomous snakes are that are there. That way you do not get into any dangerous situations with them. And in general, if you don't know what something is that you're looking at, don't get close to it and don't handle it. It could potentially be something dangerous. My final tip is to make sure to minimize your impact on the animals and the environments that you explore in. As wildlife watchers that are going outside and enjoying these natural landscapes, we have a duty to make sure that we are wise stewards of the environment and that we don't damage the habitat more than necessary. We don't litter, don't disturb the animals more than is necessary to enjoy them. If you notice that an animal is getting disturbed or frightened by your presence, don't get any closer. In fact, it might even be a good idea to back up. We are, in fact, visiting their domain, so we need to make sure that we respect that and treat them as we would want to be treated in that way. So those are my top 10 tips for people just getting started with wildlife watching. I hope these tips are helpful, and I hope that you got something out of this video. In the future, I will be making videos on more advanced tips for wildlife watching, but this is going to be my starter video, since I figured that the most important place to start is right at the beginning. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video.